Morning and welcome to this Resilience First webinar. I'm Robert Hall and I'm the Executive Director of Resilience First, and thank you for joining us and the speakers and the other participants on this call this morning. I hope you are staying well in these unpredictable times. For those of you who are viewing the opening, have viewed the opening video, I hope you gained a brief insight on our organisation. By way of introduction, Resilience First was created 2 years ago to help build resilience in business communities, whether they be communities defined by geography or special interest. Since its inception, we have attracted a wide range of major companies as champions, as well as a host of affiliated organisations and members to our network, all willing to spread the word through best practice and learnings. The coronavirus has reinforced the need for resilience at all levels of society. The rail sector is no exception, and so it is appropriate that today we are looking at keeping the nation on track. As a vital infrastructure and a mode of transport that serves many of us, then it is a subject that is of universal importance. So we have this morning two leaders in the field who consider this subject the next hour. But I will allow and thank our chairman for the session, Tom Meacock, Client Director for Strategic Rail at Atkins, to formally introduce the speakers and the topic for today. Tom, the virtual floor is yours, and thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and welcome everybody to joining us this webinar this morning. You know, in these unprecedented times where our lives have been impacted, we continue to see the important role that rail plays in moving people and really, especially in the last few months, moving freight around our country. You know, our railway connects people to places, it connects goods to markets, and ensuring we have a resilient, fit for the future railway is, you know, vitally important now and in the weeks and months ahead of us. However, this resilience of the network has been severely tested through the pandemic. You know, it's put huge stresses on the system and the people involved in keeping the railway running. And I must say a huge thank you to all the staff at Network Rail and the train operating companies and all of the railway family for keeping the railway running. They've done a fantastic job in ensuring we get our key workers to work and allow goods to move around. But the pandemic has not just tested the operational side of this of the network. It's put real strains on the fundamental commercial models of many of the railways around the world. You know, and operators and governments have been struggling with this and dealing with the implication of passenger numbers falling to a fraction of what they were before before this incident, and fare box revenues almost completely disappearing. So, having kept the system running, you know, through the peak of the pandemic, we must now start to look at how we collectively help the railway recover. You know, here I personally believe it's vitally important we take a human-centered approach to this. You're looking at using clear communication to supported by really accurate data to help ensure that the behaviours of passengers is there to help balance demand with the supply as the system comes back online and fully recovers. And we must continue to do this in ensuring the railway is able to deliver mobility for everyone in society. And I think it's also now time to start thinking about reimagining our transport systems. You know, our actions now in the next few months could set the direction of infrastructure in this country for the next decade. So it's critical we consider how we can do things differently to ensure the transport system remain flexible, efficient, resilient, and able to deliver the UK's ambitions around economic recovery, growth, net zero, and equality. So I'm really pleased to be able to chair this session. Really pleased that we've got two fantastic speakers today to talk about their perspective around resilience and what it means to the railway. We've got a format which has a short presentation for each of them and then some time for questions. So please do put your questions into the chat box and we'll be picking those up as we go. But first, I'm really pleased to hand over to Nick King, Group Director for Network Services from Network Rail.
Hi and good morning, everybody. I'm Nick King, the Group Director for Network Services, and I'd like to thank you for having me to speak to you today at this critical time for our industry and our country. Network Services was created in June of last year as a direct response to putting passengers and freight first programme within Network Rail. but it's also about putting operations back at the heart of the railway, not just for operations' sake, but because it's crucial to the delivery of the railway's purpose in getting people and goods where they need to be safely and on time. What we provide as network services is vital to improving the railway, and that's what makes it such a terribly rewarding journey for me and my team. I have to say that it's a challenge with the current COVID-19 at the top of the list right at the moment. The reason for that, though, is that Network Services on behalf of Network Rail heads up resilience of the railway and also links into the broader other members of the community that make up the railway. So it's a terribly challenging time for us right now. This means that right now the country's extremely busy. We're terribly busy as a team. And it's one of the reasons why I like talking to the Resilience First events like today, because resilience isn't just on the agenda, it actually is the agenda. And right now, that's where it needs to be more than ever before. Traditionally, the railway has been slow to respond to changes in the market. Passenger growth is linked with economic growth. And this means that growth is concentrated on the busiest parts of our system. Much of the industry's focus is centered on catering for peak demand, and solving this is very resource intensive. And for example, you'll see that in Thameslink, in Crossrail are good examples. Like it is done in so many aspects of our lives already, COVID-19 creates a novel problem. Passenger demand is something between 5 and 10% of the norm. But right now, the industry's cost base has remained similar. We don't know how the railway will respond in the future. For certain, we don't. But in any instance where passenger numbers are lower, that affects the dynamics of what the industry and our model will look like. So therefore, a focus on efficiency will absolutely move to the forefront of our agenda. But in the meantime, I'd like just to give you a few highlights of what's been going on the ground. We formed the Strategic Crisis Management Team, which has focused on maintaining the operational integrity of the railway and the business. We've introduced a reduced passenger timetable so that reliable services are still available to move key workers around the network, including NHS staff. A timetable like this typically takes 14 weeks. The teams have done this in just a few days. And then just this week, we've done it again and increased the number of services by something like 4,000 extra daily services were introduced as of Monday. And that was done over a couple of weeks. We've also opened as Network Rail temporary training facilities to be able to train signallers and other key safety staff so that we're able to bring new recruits into the industry and bring them on board so we're able to continue to staff our signal boxes, control rooms and other places like that. We've also done some very novel things. We've also appealed for retired signallers to volunteer. And as an example, we've had more than 200 signallers from across Wales and the west of England respond to that call to arms. With the lockdown easing, managing demand for our services and to avoid the risk of queuing and passenger loading has been very difficult. This is absolutely moving to the forefront of what we as the industry are trying to do. And telling businesses and passengers that they should, where possible, avoid travelling on public transport has been a very hard message for us. But we're very pleased that passengers have responded well to that demand, to that request and to those communications. We've also had to take care of our own staff. We've got our staff, 20,000 people every day out on the network, and to operate in a socially distancing way while providing customer service and the other matters is extremely difficult and something that's been very high on our agenda. And we're pleased so far that we've quite successfully managed that. Initial mitigations have included and have been advised to people, which is around buying tickets online, traveling outside of the peaks, allowing more time for your journey, being considerate for others, following the rules set by government, having respect for the railway staff, keeping social distancing, using face coverings, carrying hand sanitizer with you so you can protect others and yourself, and obviously finally washing your hands after journeys. It's been these behavioural changes that will be instrumental in how we adapt to the change and the challenge of providing customer service going forward. Providing information on navigating our infrastructure, catching a train, has always been central to what we do. And now it's absolutely vital that we get that and we go much deeper and that we provide critical information when passengers and customers need it. While it's incredibly important to talk about markets and economics, we must also be mindful that right now our customers want to feel safe when they are with us. Building passenger confidence is absolutely essential. We're talking about avoiding an invisible, permeating threat. And I don't mean to be flippant, but many of our passengers are not too worried about the things that we have to do into the background to manage this pandemic. What they want to do is to be able to turn up and have the service that we promise. Therefore, as an industry, we've had to come together to deliver those pieces. And I'll give you another example. It's like when you're on a plane, and that's if you can remember those days, and there is turbulence. You look at the cabin crew for assurance. When you see that they're getting on with their job, you feel better, safer. We want our passengers and freight customers to know that they're in good hands. This is why it's going to be about being clear, having a consistent communication and guidelines in how all aspects of the railway come together. We need to come up with a model of the railway during a pandemic that keeps people safe. We're good at doing this anyway, and we've always wanting to strive to be better. And now just need to shift it to another gear and move it up the scales. We're already coming up with a recovery plan of how we manage stations through these difficult times. Just imagine what it would be like if you're at Euston, where normally there are hundreds of people in the waiting areas. If you now talk about social distancing, you can have a few people in that area. It's absolutely incredible. That's been mostly about passengers so far, but I do think we need to talk about freight. And where do I begin? Well, the thing I'd like to start with is absolute pride. Freight is delivering quietly in the background, just like it has always done, but now more so than ever. Since the lockdown, freight has delivered monumental achievements that have kept this country going. We are working with the rail freight industry all over Britain to keep our freight services running. It's helping the economy, the National Health Service, providing petrol to the pumps and food and other essential items to the shops. And also, this is an area where the freight industry has been incredibly adaptive and reacted fast. We've managed with their support, we've launched a 72-hour express service delivering hygiene and medical food products from Valencia and Murcia to London. It's also been helping to keep the power on in the country and the lights on in our houses by delivering vital biomass material to the Drax power station in Yorkshire. This has been even more challenging considering the floods we had earlier in the year closed one of the lines in, so we were working down to single line working. These are unprecedented times. Looking at a different part of what we're trying to do, to keep our railways safe and open, we're having to increasingly use artificial intelligence and robotics. But on a complex and vast network like ours, it doesn't actually come without challenges. As a safety critical industry, you could say we are understandably cautious when it comes to quantum innovation leaps. Demonstration and evidence of tangible benefits are crucial. These days, people get excited about the word disruptive as it's bandied around. Not so much in our industry, as that traditionally means different things to us. But that said, the use of AI and similar technologies in rail is growing, but we have a long way to go. For starters, new technology needs common data structures. We need better network models and data formats before we can take full advantage of the state-of-the-art technology. Then there's full disclosure. The disunion in network rail between engineering databases and operational systems driven by legacy databases. Speak to an engineer, a technician, or a planner, and they'll say we're overwhelmed with data, but not data that we can trust or use to modernize our approach to maintenance that's needed to deliver smarter and safer services to our passengers and freight customers. But the good news is that we are making some real progress in delivering a data-driven railway that our passengers and customers are already starting to see the benefits of. Now that we've established Network Services Directorate, we can support the industry position on data, since it has both an operational and an engineering focus. This is coupled to our Intelligent Infrastructure Programme, which has been running for a little over a year now and is proving to be a real asset in asset management. Intelligent infrastructure is how we are joining up the disparate dots of data to revolutionize how maintenance work is carried out across the network. We are providing the tools and skills that the regions and routes need so that they can carry out the right maintenance decisions at the right time. And I cannot stress enough the collaborative effort and the dedication of colleagues from across our business, along with our partner companies who have contributed to the programme in what has been an impressive first year. Thanks to the Intelligent Infrastructure Programme, the railway can now be seen with more clarity, detail and focus than ever before. In one of their first major milestones, the teams working with the Network Rail Air Operations team rolled out the first phase of our new aerial and 3D imagery. They've already captured over 12,000 kilometers of track using helicopters equipped with high-definition cameras and 3D light detection and ranging radar. With this data, maintenance teams will be able to plan and execute crucial work from the safety of the offices, or, as now, from their homes. It will also lead to improved access planning, incident management, and how the railway carries out investigations. We're also progressing our predict and prevent capabilities through enhanced track decision support tools. This is giving engineers fingertip access to data on track assets that will help them make informed decisions on maintenance. We're addressing the issues around trustworthy data that I mentioned earlier, and we're turning it into intelligent information so that frontline and support teams can work smarter and safer. The phrase "start as you mean to go on" comes to mind, and I am really looking forward to seeing what the Intelligent Infrastructure Programme delivers in year 2. And in the context of COVID-19, one of the specific areas I've been working on recently is around how we use that data to help our maintenance teams identify cyclic top faults and predict and carry out predictive maintenance, therefore to prevent them. We're also using new modelling scenarios that have been created in response to the timetables that recognise the impact of COVID-19 on the way things are managed. And again, this allows our teams to see where the maintenance work can be carried out more effectively and get greater access to the network. New data is necessary in all those ways. The other thing that we're doing in response to COVID-19 is that we're using our relationships with UITP to ensure that we get the latest position from other countries on the management of this pandemic. Of course, as with many other aspects of the pandemic, it's not overly helpful to directly compare our position with other countries, as other countries have imposed different management methods based on their own government's instructions on how they want to manage the pandemic. Each country has also entered the COVID-19 curve at different speeds, so that the measures have been seen to be different. Social distancing on railway networks is a truly difficult task, and trains are only really viable when they are carrying high density numbers of passengers. So you can see there that we've got a huge conflict between how we manage social distancing and how we carry on with the normal business model of running a railway. But overall, we're using the UITP data relationship to share and receive best practice so that we're able to enhance our response to the pandemic. This has been the first national crisis for the rail system since the last World War. Passenger demand has been decimated as a result of saving lives. No industry crisis management plan covers such a scenario. We're still in the eye of the storm, and we're having to learn and adapt every day in real time. The experience means we'll be able to update our plans so we are better prepared for the future. Just looking at the incredible way so many of us have adapted to working from home every day with all of the associated challenges that bring has been incredible. As for the long-term impact of the railway, this is going to be hard to predict at this point. What will the future demand be in the future? What will the new norm actually look like? With demand at less than 10%, this will challenge the whole business model of our railway. So yes, extreme challenges do lie ahead, and there is no point sugarcoating it either in the short term or in the long term. But I do believe that the railway is a symbol of stability for good reasons, and I think this is going to bring the industry even closer together. The industry has worked together brilliantly over the last 12 weeks in terms of the COVID-19 crisis, and we've achieved incredibly high levels of performance and working together. We must maintain that focus and that collaboration. Yes, there will be structural changes, but they will be built on what has been the biggest lessons learned exercise in the history of the railway. We're all part of that challenge and opportunity, and a true test of resilience is if there ever has been one. It's inspiring, and I am proud of the work that we're all doing in supporting our country at this time. If there's ever been a maxim that's right and relevant and true, it's what doesn't break you only makes you stronger. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Nick, for that presentation. Fantastic. And we've got an opportunity now for some questions. So I've seen a few come through, but please do put some into the chat so we can go to Nick. I think maybe if I could start, Nick, just because there's so much going on in that conversation around the activity, the work that's going on, the teams are having to scrabble really hard. And I think you opened your speech by saying resilience isn't just on the agenda, it is the agenda. I was just interested to see whether you've got any views around lessons you've learned from outside of rail and been able to bring in, or internationally, or are you having to effectively learn the lessons as you go within your organisation?
For sure. I mean, we're learning a huge amount internally. Internally, I mean, across the whole of the railway. But also, I think if you look at the way other parts of society adapted to this, if you go into any shop, screens were up within days for those shops that were open on protecting those visible barriers between us, so that we're not spreading the virus in that way. So I think if you look at the way people have adapted, look at the way freight has moved itself around, how we've kept the superstores and the other things going. These are all the things of learning how to be agile and adaptive, and the elimination of bureaucracy. We significantly helped in building some of the Nightingale hospitals. You look at what was achieved there, it's absolutely incredible. People were highly impressed with what the Chinese did when they built their hospitals. We've done the same over here. And those are the sort of things we've got to learn from, how we did that in real time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And no, there's a question here around sort of technology and what technology you're either looking to bring into the railway to help you support you through social distancing, or what technology you've already deployed there. What are you doing around technology to support social distancing?
I mean, I think on that one, I mean, that's where I raised, that's why I brought the intelligent infrastructure into the conversation, because that's all around how you use data to reduce the need for people to interact either face-to-face or from a safety point of view, engaging and interacting into the danger zone of actually entering the rail corridor. So for me, the critical part is around how we utilize and access that data. And as I said, we've got data coming out of our ears. We have so much data, we actually almost don't know what to do with it. The question is getting that into a usable format that's able to be used on a daily basis by frontline staff. That's going to be that's our big challenge, and that's why I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of the Intelligent Infrastructure Programme over the next 12 months, because that's the challenge they've got from me. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think the more we can use data, the more we can support the decisions through that, the better. There's a really good comment from Willie Baker here, just passing on his thoughts to all the staff and condolences to any staff that suffered as a result of sad instances around the railway. And he's asked an interesting point around how do you create with RDG and probably other bodies a cohesive strategic crisis command. Is that something that's in place?
Yes, absolutely. Within the rail industry, we have something called the JOT. It's the Joint Executive Oversight Team. It's never been used before. It was actually only formed at the latter part of last year as a consequence of the 25th of July hot weather day and the repeat that we had a few weeks later with the 9th of August. And out of that, we actually created a cross-industry, the Joint Executive Oversight Team. So that has all of the owning groups, the freight companies, DfT, Transport Scotland, Transport for Wales, Transport for London, BTP, Transport Focus, ORR, RSSB, you name it. All of the, and we meet twice a week. We were doing three times a week in the early part of the crisis. Now it's twice a week. And that's where we bring together all of the different parts of the industry. And Paul Plummer and I jointly chair that. And yeah, that's how we're bringing that all together. And I have to say, it's been a very, very powerful and useful forum. And also, if I use the word collaboration in my speech, the collaborative style by which all of the industry has come together has been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I know a little bit about that because our president, Philip Hoare, sits on that as the chair of the RSG, doesn't he?
He does indeed, he does, and he contributes to us on a Monday afternoon and a Thursday morning.
And it's almost so many people involved there. It's kind of almost good you've got a virtual room to do it in, because that would need quite a big board table for you all to get around if you were doing it in person.
Absolutely, yes.
So there's a couple of questions coming, Nick, as well around, I guess, the economics of the situation. Where you look at some of your stations, which became destinations, were very driven by retail, and actually, the passenger service and and the fare box. I mean, I guess it's a crystal ball kind of question, but how do you see railway services being able to carry on operating with such massive losses and the stress around revenue? You got any thoughts around how you see that kind of coming out of this in the longer term?
I'm not sure anybody here would want to get the crystal ball out to try to predict what will happen to revenue. I think what is absolutely critical, though, the railway is a fundamental part of our economy, and it's the backbone of keeping the country moving and progressing. Therefore, we have to, and that's what's being expected of us from our politicians, devolved governments, is that we keep the railway available and moving, and that we provide the maximum capacity that we are able to provide safely, bearing in mind that we have to respect and look after our own staff. So I think the critical thing for us is keeping the railway moving. So far, that is something that the industry has done exceptionally well. And I can't reiterate how well that has been done. And I think as we go forward, we need to wait and see what comes out through government policy around, PHE, PHS, and PHW, around the guidance they give to us, because that's what will determine the volumes of people that are able to be carried on the network.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a question here around the other part of the network, which is not just about people, and then you said it yourself, the important role it's played in freight and how freighters can use to hold up. Do you see this being actually potentially a transformational opportunity for freight, and actually we see the network moving more freight, or in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we've been able to do on the basis that for the last many weeks we've been running 12,500 daily passenger services is that we've been able to give freight significantly greater access to the railway. And that's allowed us to run longer trains at greater velocity, average velocity, and so there's some significant things that have been done to support freight and improve the way we move freight around the country. And I think the key will now be is that as we move forward into the next phase of recovery, how do we build those learnings into, not as more than learnings, that reality? How do you build those into the timetables that we go forward? And I mean, that's an important point. We're now obviously at that point of thinking about what is the next stage of evolution of I'll call it the timetable within UK Rail. So as of Monday just gone, as I said, we stepped up the number of services. So we're running sort of 16,000 passenger services a day. Yesterday there were 434 freight services run on the network. And as we go forward, we've got to be in a position to safely start to build those numbers back up. To do that, we've got to make sure we're able to look after our staff, provide social distancing, sensible working arrangements. That's why we've been asking members of the public to wear masks, facial coverings when they're traveling on the network. These are all the important things that need to be done as we start to rebuild the railway.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's quite interesting. It's no longer probably a question of passengers and freight, as we perhaps always said in the past, and people forget the and freight bit, but actually, thinking about what does new normal look like, and how do we balance all these things, and we balance people's movements differently, we balance freight requirements differently, and we see where it goes over the long term.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think that also, Tom, brings in, it links into decarbonisation as well. There's an absolute need as a country. We have legal obligations to achieve some very stringent targets in the future. Now's an opportune moment for the railway, for the country to come together and really start to address those factors. Yeah,
I absolutely agree, Nick. And I think we could keep asking you questions for the full slot, but that would be perhaps a little unfair to our second guest, Dyan Crowther, who's the Chief Executive from HS1, who I think we've got on the call with us. We've had some technical challenges this morning, but Dyan, hopefully you are there and you can hear us.
I am, Tom. I am here. So there's a bit of a workaround, but we're very resourceful in the rail sector, as you know. So.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I'll leave you to take us through your presentation. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Tom, and good morning, everybody. So, as Thomas would have said, I'm Dyan Crowther. I'm the Chief Exec of HS1 Ltd. Next slide, please, Bina. So, for those of you that don't know, HS1 has the 30-year concession to own and operate the UK's first section of high-speed railway, and as well as the stations along the route. We're probably better known for operating Eurostar, or not operating Eurostar, one of our customers. But basically, we provide services for our domestic operator, South Eastern, our international operator, Eurostar, and also a little bit of freight. And we connect London with a number of European destinations, including Amsterdam, Brussels, Paris, Marseille, and also with parts of Kent and Sussex. So that's just a little bit about kind of HS1. Next slide, please, Bina. So Nick has articulated already, very, very well the challenges facing the rail industry today because of COVID-19, and indeed outlined the resilience that the industry has demonstrated. So certainly from HS1's perspective, our big challenge has been much the same in terms of, operating a timetable to support key workers. So certainly we have 70% of our domestic services still running, and also more importantly, keeping the system safe for passengers and employees. And again, Nick went through, a number of kind of activities that have been ongoing, to ensure that is the case, not just in kind of the domestic sector, but also in the high speed sector as well. Next slide. So one of the things that makes us a little bit different the rest of the UK sector is our international services. So one of the things that has been forefront of our mind is protecting our international services, across borders, and indeed, some of the other challenges that we face on that. So we are continually assessing ways we can work with government and stakeholders to kind of protect our international services. Eurostar is an open access operator. It doesn't have the same protections as other franchise operators, and is therefore far more subject to commercial risk. So, for example, some of you may not be aware, but Eurostar has furloughed 80% of its employee base. So very, very different scenarios to the domestic operators here. They are operating one train a day to Paris and one train a day to Brussels, and that's the extent of the operation at the moment. So clearly that's going to have quite a significant impact on their commercial side of things. So one of the areas we lobby quite hard on is to kind of make sure that Eurostar is afforded some form of protection, be it from its French ownership, its shareholders, or indeed arm's length from the UK government side of things. So over the longer term, we are increasingly seeing, some phenomenal environmental benefits of international high-speed travel, and I'll say a little bit more about that later on. But we've got to ensure that that type of service receives the support it requires and is not placed at a competitive disadvantage as a result of any government support for airlines. We need to ensure that when we recover from this crisis, we're able to continue to provide and offer a brilliant alternative, to air travel, and continue to carry as many customers as possible. Next slide, please, Bina. So, one of the key challenges that we need to kind of look at is how do we forecast in the future what domestic growth we're going to have. We don't know what the impact it's going to have longer term on the economy and therefore future demand for rail. But what we do know is that, as Nick said earlier, rail is the backbone of the UK economy. We know, we can foresee that demand should and will come back. We also know that before COVID-19, some parts of our network were under incredible pressure, through congestion, through overcrowding. And it would be easy to forget those pressures. And it would also be easy to press the pause button, on a number of investments. So we need to remember that, we have seen significant growth. We should also be confident that that growth will return, or at least be able to consider how it will return, so that we're in a position to be able to respond. Next slide, please, Bina. A good example of that is if we do press the pause button, it takes an awful long time to make the case for any additional rolling stock, on any part of the network. So we know on High Speed 1, before COVID-19, we were leaving people standing at places like Ashford and indeed at Folkestone in the morning peak. So again, incredible testimony to the success of high-speed domestic services. We also know it can take up to 4 years to procure new rolling stock. And when we were looking at our demand forecasts before COVID-19, we were anticipating, people not being able to get on trains at Ebbsfleet, by about 2024. So again, we know that, that scenario will happen again. So we need to continue to be able to look forwards, to make the right plans and to make the right investment choices as well. And as I've sort of said, our challenge is to understand what the crisis means for future demands. What will the long-term economic impact be, and for how long we will need to be subject to social distancing. Next slide, please, Bina. I want to share a little bit with you in terms of some of the fantastic, benefits that rail brings to the UK economy. And we ran a economic impact study last year using SDG. And what I'm going to sort of share with you is sort of some of the sound bites, because a lot of people always used to sort of say to me, well, what's High Speed 1 ever done for the UK? Well, now I can tell them. So I can tell them that, £83 million in journey time savings just on domestic services, 400,000 more workers in Kent, 15,000 new homes, all of which starts to make a significant, contribution, to the UK economy. Now, part of the reasons why we did this research work was to support the case for HS2 as well, because we accept high-speed railways, to build are very expensive. They're a high level investment, but you do get the returns, not overnight, but gradually it will come. Next slide, please, Bina. One of our strategic objectives is to also develop additional international rail routes. One of my ambitions since I've been at High Speed 1 is to see, a few more destinations on the departure boards at St Pancras. And we've had, Paris and Brussels only for far too long. Eurostar launched its services to Amsterdam this year, and before COVID-19, we're very successful. Now, as an infrastructure manager, we've been working collaboratively with SNCF Russo, Lycia, and also Infrabel to start to investigate additional destinations around Europe. We launched a concept for Bordeaux, generated a huge amount of interest, and part of that was to really make sure that infrastructure managers could work collaboratively together, share data. It's quite difficult, for a train operator to start an international train service. So what we were doing was trying to work through removing some of those barriers that potential train operators would face. It's been very successful. We've done joint funding. We've got a joint commercial offer, and we also have done a joint demand study for future demand. And we're also quite keen on looking at routes to Frankfurt as well. The railway is a complicated system. You cannot do these type of things on your own. And Nick used the word collaboration quite a bit earlier on in his presentation. So even for growth, there needs to be a strong element of collaboration, and certainly across international boundaries. Next slide, please, Bina. I also thought I'd put up sort of some of the benefits of international high-speed rail. A lot of this falls in around sustainability, and the fact that rail is green. High-speed rail is a huge competitor to air. It is the green alternative. And again, we have a great opportunity under the COVID-19 crisis to be able to sort of push high-speed rail. And it's certainly high on the European Union's agenda at the moment. And next year, 2021, is the European Year of Rail. And we should be doing everything that we can in our power, to promote the benefits of high-speed rail and domestic rail coming out of the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide, please, Bina. I'll briefly mention freight. Nick covered it, incredibly well. On high-speed one, we have very little freight. It only makes up about 2% of our total traffic, which is about 2 trains a day in each direction. We'd like to see that change. We're very interested in express freight, high-speed freight, certainly carrying perishables from Spain, and the Mediterranean countries. This is all around reducing shelf life on perishables, and again, we've been in a few discussions with some potential operators in terms of how we operate that kind of high-speed system or that express freight system. So it's certainly on our agenda for the future, and sort of something that could be a bit of a game changer, we believe, in shifting modal kind of transport, i.e. from road to rail. Next slide, please. I think before I finish, it would be remiss of me not to remind us all about Brexit. HS1 connects the UK to Europe, and the negotiation around the UK's future relationship with Europe have still not finished. Before COVID-19, we were all talking about Brexit. It's still there. We have sort of some key asks that we continue to lobby for in the background, not least of all maintaining a level playing field for future international operators. Being able to continue to rely on European suppliers to help maintain our railway system. We are a French railway. And also making sure that we can compete with air so that we can maintain free-flowing open borders. We can make it easy for passengers to move around our system. And what we don't want is for Brexit to be a barrier to growth. We want it to continue to enable growth. Next slide, Bina. So in summary, the rail sector, as Nick has outlined, and indeed myself, is a proven driver of economic growth. But certainly during this period, it needs flexibility and support from government to get through. We need to ensure a duty of care to protect future services and capacity needs. So we need to get our heads out of this crisis and actually start looking forwards, difficult as it may be, because if we don't do it, nobody else will, because we will need that sustainable transport network for the future. And finally, we also need to continue to exploit the opportunity for more high-speed rail links to Europe, other European cities. The appetite is there. It's a complicated system, but post-Brexit, the UK does need to stay connected with Europe. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Diane. That was absolutely fantastic. And see some questions already coming through for you on the chat, so but please do keep them coming. I think it's interesting. Just your question came in and you almost answered it with your slide straight away around Brexit versus COVID, and which is your biggest challenge. I don't know if you see them in that light, one versus the other, or is one harder to have a bigger impact for you as HS1?
I think they're both not without their challenges, Nick. They're both big challenges. I think longer term Brexit is our biggest challenge, because that has the opportunity to really stop competition and stop future growth. I firmly believe passenger growth will come back. It will be a different type of passenger, and we'll probably need different models. But I think that appetite for intercity travel or cross-city travel and the need to go to Europe will still be there. We need to make sure that Brexit doesn't stop that happening. Or, there are certain things that are agreed that stops competition and prevents kind of free flow of borders.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, you picked up in your presentation, Diane, as well, it's kind of that forward-looking piece about looking to the future, grappling with what's ahead, and that's where a few of the questions are. And there's an interesting one here around just how quickly do you think you can help deliver greater international travel for freight and passengers through the tunnel and through High Speed 1, given the challenges of the air sector suffering in particular?
So the work we've done with our kind of sister infrastructure managers has given us a good step in the right direction. When I first arrived at HS1, I thought, well, how difficult can it be? How difficult is it to get another international operator? Well, it's difficult, okay? We reviewed all the previous attempts, and there have been attempts, in the past. Many of you will remember, nearly 10 years ago, the ice train that rocked up at St Pancras, and it's not been back since. Now, when you start peeling them back, so some of the constraints are, as a train operator, you would have to talk to lots and lots of different interfaces. So all of whom have different commercial arrangements, all of whom have different track access agreements, all of whom have different discount policies, all of whom, have different ways of doing things. So that's kind of quite daunting from a commercial enterprise perspective if you're a train operator. So as for infrastructure managers, we all got together and proposed a kind of a simplified kind of commercial arrangement. We provide points of contact, so we've effectively done a lot of the legwork up front. Another barrier was the ability was kind of passport and sort of security controls. So we've been lobbying quite hard and working with the Home Office around bringing in, and again using technology so that we don't need to have kind of fixed border controls. So when Eurostar first started, we checked passports on trains. Now we know the technology is there, so working with the Home Office to be able to sort of do that and offering some of our destinations as a pilot study is some of the areas that we've been looking at, because these are all big cost drivers. The fixed bits, the fixed elements of the infrastructure or the fixed overhead costs, are the areas that can be quite abstractive and not make kind of international rail attractive. So starting to chip away at those areas is what we've been doing for the last sort of 2 years. And the other aspect is a cultural aspect, because wherever you go internationally, you've always got to go through France. SNCF have never been that open in terms of sharing information, sharing ideas. And what we've been doing in the last 3 years is really build up those kind of collaborative arrangements, and sharing good practice, sharing our ideas. And I think, the restructuring in France in the last 2 years has really helped as well, where they've started to split their infrastructure from their train operators. And again, the infrastructure managers over there have realised that rail growth is good, and it's good to have competition. So there's a really great window of opportunity there that if we push, and certainly using the green agenda, we can certainly sort of see more international kind of rail journeys.
Fascinating web of different people and politics you have to deal with to make that happen as well. If I could just move on to another area, which I think you illuminated to in one of your answers just before, Diane, around different types of passengers? There was an interesting question and a phrase that I quite like as well, talking about sort of before vaccine and after vaccine, and whether customer sentiment will be different kind of in a BV versus an AV world, and how you sort of see the makeup of your passengers changing over time.
Well, if we look at our two main train operators, Eurostar are a mover of business travellers primarily. Okay, so it's kind of high-end, high-revenue traffic from their perspective. COVID-19, I think, has demonstrated that it's very easy not to do those type of journeys anymore. So the traditional kind of business model, the business traveller model, is going to change quite dramatically, and I'm sure intercity operators, the long distance operators on the domestic side are going to see the same area. So potentially Eurostar will need to look at a completely different travel market, a totally different kind of business model moving forwards. More leisure, more like an easy jet type approach where it's lower fares. What does that mean? That means for us that we've really then got to start to think about our capacity at St Pancras. Any of you that travel through St Pancras will know that it gets quite full quite quickly. Eurostar increased capacity on their trains 2 or 3 years ago by 20%. Guess what? The fixed infrastructure didn't get increased by 20%. So, longer trains, but not kind of more space for passengers to queue in. So, if they're going to be moving to a model that kind of pushes more people onto trains, or fills up their trains to 200% capacity rather than the 60 or 70% capacity they've enjoyed in the past, but at a higher fare, then we've got to be ready as an infrastructure manager to be able to support that from a customer experience perspective. But again, we need to work with our train operators, with our customers, to understand what their future business models are going to be, so that we can be an agile infrastructure manager to support that. And in terms of domestic travel, who knows? It's going to be very different. I think certainly sitting in on the Pan London calls and looking at is the season ticket now dead? So are people going to be more flexibly working? And then again, how do we respond to that? But then we've got other exciting opportunities, also on High Speed 1, potential for a theme park, more housing, more growth. So maybe having that kind of flexibility of working will kind of, certainly assist HS1 in terms of being able to manage that capacity in the future, and keep rail as a really attractive option for people to go about their business.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Dyan. I'll ask you one more, and then I'll bring Nick in as well and ask you a couple of questions together before as we wrap up the session. But there's quite there's an interesting question here that's been raised around, I guess, the unique operations with High Speed 1 and your train operators, where you've been dealing with international operations already for some time, and whether you had any existing learning that's really helped you. Things like the question sort of talks about the prevention of rabies and emergency plans that you already had in place that may be able to support the TOCs and infrastructure providers in the UK going forward. Is there anything unique about HS1 and your TOCs that we could learn from?
Well, certainly in the past, when I can't remember what the previous, I think it was the flu, I can't remember the name of it, but and also Ebola. So there were temperature checks and things like that imposed at St Pancras at the time, because obviously it's an international border. So there's certainly kind of lessons, there, and we'd be ready to implement those in the event that temperature checks were needed to be kind of imposed again. I think the thing to remember for sort of St Pancras is that the Eurostar element is a restricted zone. So it's a closed zone, so it's easy to police. So to enable you to be able to do that on the wider UK rail network, you would have to think about, how do I make these kind of restricted zones and closed areas? And if I look at the rest of St Pancras, where I've probably got 7 or 8 entrances, it then starts to become very, very difficult. And indeed that would be the case, I think, for many of the 15, 20 large terminal stations if you started there across the UK. So every station is unique, every scenario is different. We could, we've certainly built on our experience in terms of past experiences at St Pancras, but they're unique to St Pancras because of the type of station that we are.
Yeah, okay, that's really useful. Thank you very much. And I just perhaps bring you both in for one last question to you each. And Dyan, while you've got the floor, or the mic already, I'll ask it to you first, then Nick. Just, I guess, if you could have, what is the one thing you would like to use the opportunity of, if this reset almost, and the recover and the reimagine of the transport system, what is the one thing you'd like to see in the future that we perhaps didn't have in the past when it comes to our railway? Dyan, do you want to go first, or do you want Nick to go first?
Let Nick go first.
Oh, thanks for that. I think, for me, to answer that question, I think it's through all of this, we've learned huge amounts of things about flexibility, innovation, adaptability, collaboration, care, respect. There's a whole host of stuff here that I think is critically important for how we take not only the country, the railway, but also the country forward. And I think those are the things that we need to embed within our organisations and our teams, and how we work and support all of our staff as well through these very difficult times.
Thank you, Nick. Dyan, did it buy you enough time for reflections?
Yeah, mine's quite specific, and it's a great opportunity, I think, to move over to digital ticketing 100%.
Yeah.
And that's removing ticket vending machines, all of that expensive infrastructure that's expensive to maintain and install, and moving over to a digital platform for ticketing across the piece, including revenue protection.
Yeah, I'd support that.
Yeah, and through that as well, giving really supporting the passenger experience, because you'll have a much closer relationship direct with the passengers as well through that, and keep them informed, keep the communication going as well. Yeah, I think that's a great answer. Well, listen, it's I mean, we could keep on talking. I'm sure the questions will keep coming in for another hour if we had it, but we need to finish on time. So I just want to thank you for such an excellent session, both of you. Really do appreciate your openness there. Some fantastic topics covered this morning, and I really appreciate everybody else in terms of their questions that they've asked through it. Again, for me, it's kind of showing the importance that the railway has to play in the UK. It's so important for the public, for the economy, and raise some really interesting points about what we need to tackle going forward, and some great new phrases for me, like high-speed freight and resilience is the agenda. So I'll try and think about how I weave those into my lexicon. But thank you very much for that. Now it's time really for me just to pass on to Robert to close the session, but I really do appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been, as you say, a fascinating hour. We've covered a lot of ground. It leaves me really only on behalf of Resilience First and all the participants who've taken part this morning to thank both speakers and the chair for a fascinating set of contributions. And we will circulate a brief summary and the presentations if the speakers allow subsequently. I hope you'll be able to join us for our next webinar, which is on the 2nd of June, which will be looking at shaping our national infrastructure with the chairman of the National Infrastructure Commission, Sir John Arnott. So beyond that, leave me to say have a very good morning and take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Nina, thank you.